Hey folks, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to flow, which is a special debate note-taking method. And the reason it's important rather than just writing random things in your notebook during a debate for taking notes is because it keeps really good track of every argument in each speech. And so I think you'll find it really helpful for when you're actually in the debate. Now, the first thing you need to know about flowing is that it requires more than one sheet of paper. You're going to need one sheet of paper for each affirmative contention. So, for example, with our cybersecurity case, there are two contentions. There's the cybersecurity advantage, and then there's the solvency contention. So we have two sheets of paper for that. And then you need an additional sheet of paper for each negative off-case position. And an example of an off-case position is like the terrorism disadvantage. An off-case position is essentially any argument that the negative is making, usually a disadvantage, that pertains to the affirmative case but doesn't directly respond to something the affirmative brought up. So, for example, in our case, the affirmative doesn't bring up terrorism as it brings up cyber terrorism, but it doesn't bring up the potential downside of the affirmative case, which is that it could increase terrorist attacks by making it more difficult for law enforcement to use those backdoors to solve terrorist plots. That's something the negative is going to bring up on the terrorism disadvantage, which gets its own sheet of paper. Does that make sense so far? Okay, cool. So now that we have our three sheets of paper for this hypothetical debate, we need to figure out how we're going to label them. And so usually within a debate, before every speech, except for the 1AC, the speaker will give what's called a roadmap where they're going to tell you what they're going to talk about. So, for example, in the 1NC and in the demonstration speech, you'll see if you watch it, I say the order is one off case, and I don't say what it's going to be yet because I haven't read it yet, and I don't want to tell the other team before I read the argument what it's going to be, so I can have a little bit of surprise there, although it's really not that big of a surprise, but it's just convention. So I say one off case, and then case in the order of cybersecurity, then solvency. And so that's how you can kind of figure out both how to put your sheets of paper in order and what their labels should be. So we know the affirmative, when they say contention 1 is cybersecurity, we write cybersecurity at the top. When they say contention 2 is solvency, we put solvency at the top. When the negative stands up and says first off is the terrorism DA, then we know to put terrorism disadvantage at the top. All right, so now we've labeled all our sheets of paper. The next thing we need to do, I actually reverse the order of these steps. You should make the columns before you label them because it's hard to make columns during a speech. So you need to make columns on the paper, and I know it's really hard to see, but So this is actually, let's start with this one. So this is my flow for cybersecurity, and as you can see, there are 7 columns on this sheet of paper, and they are all labeled at the top with the speeches. So starting with the 1AC, the 1NC, 2AC, and you'll notice right here for the 2NC/1NR, the reason I have that in one column is because the 1NR and the 2NC are not supposed to cover the same argument. So if the 2NC takes the cybersecurity advantage, the 1NR probably will take a different sheet of paper unless they're total noobs and mess that up. But in which case you can just keep writing what they say towards the bottom of the column, if that makes sense. And so you label all the speeches at the top. For flows that are pertaining to negative off-case positions, you start with the 1NC here, because these are not brought up until after the first affirmative constructive. Does that make sense? So these all start with the 1AC, and that's because they start then, and then the negative speeches start a little bit later. So that's the basic idea of how to set up a flow. Now, when you're actually flowing in a debate, when you're taking notes, it's sometimes hard to know what exactly to write down. There's 2 big things that you should write down. One is tags. So remember our big packets of evidence that we got, and we have tags, and then we have card text. We don't usually write down the cards themselves. We don't write down the quotations because there's just so much here that it would be impossible to write down everything. And the tag is supposed to be a succinct summary of what this card says. And so all we have to write down is the tag. If you want to write down more information, you absolutely can, but you usually don't have to because the tag gets the gist of what the card was. The second thing you write down is analytics. So an analytic argument is an argument that does not have a quotation or evidence backing it. So maybe think of it as like one big tag. And towards starting in the 2AC and then onward, there will be analytic arguments in the demonstration speeches, and you should write those down as well. All right, so you should practice your flowing if you watch the demonstration speeches because it'll help. Thanks for watching.